Hi guys, the Metal Maniac back again, and in this video I'm going to be ranking the Mayhem albums. Now, I had already ranked the Mayhem albums in a different video, but that was a separate ranking in the other video. I just ranked the albums from the Dead era, which was only part of a larger era of the band, which I call the Classic era. Now in this ranking I'm going to rank every single release from the Classic era. Basically anything released between 1986 to 1994. So yeah, the Classic era, basically starting with Pure Fucking Armageddon and ending with De Mysterious Dom Satanas. Yeah, with that, let's just begin. So, coming in at last place, in at number 10, no surprise to anyone who's watched most of my other Mayhem videos talking about this particular release, and that's the Henhouse recordings. Yeah, I've said this before and I'll say it again. This is probably the worst recording I've ever heard in all of metal. It's so raw, it's way too raw. It's even way too raw, even for black metal standards. Like, this is literally just white noise. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you can't hear the instruments at all. Dead's vocals basically get buried in the mix to the point where you can't hear him at all, and it's just all around an absolute dumpster fire of an album. It's just it was a waste of money, honestly. I unfortunately didn't know anything about this when I bought it, so I was like, oh look, another Mayhem release I haven't heard of before, I'm gonna buy it, you know. But it's just an absolute mess, and definitely the worst out of the Classic era of Mayhem releases. Alright, coming in at number 9 is one of only two releases from the Classic era of Mayhem that I don't actually own, and that's Live in Zeitz. Yeah, it's definitely their worst live album of the Classic era. It's just the worst recorded of their live albums from that time period. It's not. Here's the thing: it's not quite as bad as the Henhouse recordings, but it's still really bad. And it's just something that I refuse to buy because of how bad it is. And it's just, I would say it's almost equal in terms of the Henhouse record. Like, for example, to get a scale of how bad it is, just imagine the quality of audio from the Henhouse recordings, but in a live environment. Yeah, that's how bad it is. But yeah, Live in Zeitz is absolutely terrible. Another one that I highly recommend you just stay away from. It's really bad. But that's at my number 9 spot. Alright, number 8. Number 8 is... hold on, I have it here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Number 8 is Live in Sporksborg. Another extremely badly recorded album. It's almost, if not just as bad as Live in Zeitz. And it's the only Mayhem live record that's actually sourced from a bootleg. Yeah, it's sourced from a bootleg. This originally was released as a bootleg called Dawn of the Black Hearts, which is, you know, infamous for having that really, really disrespectful cover of, you know, Dead's corpse on it. Yeah, for years and years, the only way you could get that audio was with that bootleg. Oh yeah, 2017. Sorry, I was gonna say 2018, but no, it's 2017. In 2017, they finally released an official version of that audio. They renamed it and put a completely different cover on it, but it's the exact same audio. Yeah, it's a weird one in their discography because, like I said, it's the only one that's sourced from a bootleg. Yeah, I mean, again, it's just as bad as the other. I mean, okay, it's not quite as bad as the Hennis recordings, but I'd say it's almost as bad as Live in Zeitz. Um, but yeah, I have nothing really much else to say about this. It's just another one that I again avoid getting. And it's another one that I unfortunately didn't know how bad it was before I actually bought it. Um, all right, next up is Live in Jisham. Yeah, this I believe was the first or second of their classic era live albums. It's definitely better than Live in Sportsborg and Live in Zeitz. Not nowhere as good as Live in Leipzig, but it's sort of in that in between where it's not bad as the ones I just mentioned, but not as great as Live in Leipzig. It's just an okay. I mean, it's pretty much the exact same track listing as majority of the other live albums, but in terms of audio quality, it's okay. It's not super bad. It's not super unlistenable, but it's also not something that that's like oh, I want to listen to a Mayhem live album. I'll go. It's not like it's not like a right away thing. At least for me, it's not. Maybe once in a great while I'll put this on, but it's usually not something in terms of me wanting to listen to a live album by Mayhem. It's not like one of the first things that I put on the turntable and listen to. But yeah, overall it's just okay. Um. Next up, number 6 is the second of the two of from this era that I don't actually own, and that's Death Crush. Probably their most overrated release ever. Now, there are some people that will disagree and say that De Mysteriis Dom Satanis is their most overrated release ever. I kind of have to disagree on that. I think it's one of their best. But yeah, I personally think that Death Crush is the most overrated thing Mayhem's ever put out. It has its good moments and its bad moments. Oh, hold on. Alright, sorry, I had to check something on my list. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, let's start out with the positives with this release. First off, the production. I love the raw, gritty production. It's raw and gritty, but whoever produced it and whoever mixed it was able to keep it raw, but keep it away from being keep it away from being the bad type of raw that's on the stuff that I mentioned previous on this list. Maybe minus Live and Just Him. Yeah, the production's great. The instrumentation is great. I mean, Mayhem's never had really bad instrumentation at all. I think pretty much every band member has done really, really well with their respective instruments and stuff like that. But one of the main things I really dislike about Death Crush is Maniac's vocals. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Maniac is definitely the worst vocalist this band ever had. I mean, he's terrible. And he's the only vocalist he's the only Mayhem vocalist I generally dislike, and I'm generally sort of annoyed by his vocals. He's sort of, so Dead, of course, has, the iconic sort of raspy growls. Why am I forgetting his name? Oh, Attila. Attila has those sort of very sort of exaggerated, sort of ghoulish sort of moans and weird sounds he does, and just overall, and then with the Pure Fucking Armageddon demo, Necro Butcher has those very deep, almost death metal kind of guttural vocals. But yeah, Maniac has these really annoying sort of wails and yells that aren't really fitting of this type of music. Like, yeah, sure, the early days, you know, they were teetering on the edges between death metal and black metal, kind of. But even then, these are pretty weird yells and just pretty weird vocals overall. They kind of, I mean, they're so bad. Here's the thing. I still can't decide whether Maniac's vocals on here sound more like a dying cat or a toddler throwing a temper tantrum. Yeah, they're that bad. But yeah, I mean, the vocals by Maniac is probably one of the biggest problems I have with Death Crush. The other thing I want to mention is the fact that, the lack of vocals by Messiah. Now, Messiah was originally, you know, in the band, it was after, he came in after the, Pure Fucking Armageddon demo, and, he did vocals, I think, he was the vocalist, he did a couple of live shows, maybe like I don't know, a handful of live shows, and he did start recording, he did start with the recording process of, Death Crush. I think he did 2 songs before I guess he had to leave for whatever reason. Of course, Venom cover, Witching Hour, and I believe also, I don't know this for sure, but I think it's him. It very much sounds like him. The version of Pure Fucking Armageddon on the Death Crush EP, because it doesn't sound like Maniac. I'm pretty sure it's Messiah. But he only did 2 songs. And I almost knocked over my thing. Hold on, my computer. There we go. Anyway, so he only did 2 songs, and I wish he did the entire EP because I really prefer his vocals over Maniac's. But the 2 songs that he's on are really good. Those vocals are really good on those. If you want to hear a very good sort of example of Messiah's vocals, look up one of the early 1986 live shows where basically almost every single song is a Venom cover. He does a really great job, and I think he's one of the most underrated vocalists from Mayhem, maybe besides Necro Butcher. I know most people don't like his vocals on the first demo, but I kind of do. But yeah, overall, Death Crush is a mixed bag. There's some elements I love, but then there's some elements that I hate. So that's why it's kind of sort of near the middle portion of this ranking. Let's see. Number 5. All right. Number 5 is Out from the Dark. Yeah, I mean, originally, with my Dead era ranking, I had this at number 1. It's kind of bumped down a little bit. Now, not just because this is a broader ranking, it's not just including the stuff with Dead on vocals, but also because there's a couple others that I like a little bit more now. But I still love this album. It's not like a traditional album, it's a compilation. It's a compilation of quite a few different rehearsal tracks from 1989. Now, unlike the Henhouse recordings, where those rehearsal tracks, absolutely terrible audio, the audio on here is really, really good. Again, it's that mid-range sort of raw quality to it, where it's raw, it's raw, but not, absolutely ridiculously so. Yeah, I mean, you have the of course, traditional sort of songs from this era: Death Crush, Chainsaw Gutfuck, Necrolust, Pure Fucking Armageddon, Carnage. And then you have 3 songs that would later be featured on De Mysteriis Dom Satanis, Funeral Fog, Freezing Moon, and Buried by Time and Dust. Not too much of anything unique on here besides maybe the alternative intro to Freezing Moon, where Dead does sort of a slightly different version of the spoken word intro he does in most versions of Freezing Moon. Yeah, it's just an overall very sort of good collection of rehearsal tracks. Alright, number 4. Number four might be probably the most controversial pick on this list because it's not at number one or number two. But coming at number four is De Mysteriis Dom Satanis. And yeah, I love this album for the most part. There's very few things I have complaints about. Maybe there's just one actually. Maybe one and then one minor gripe. First off, the major gripe is the title track. The title track is, in terms of instrumental wise, very good. One of their best performances. Vocal wise, it is annoying. Now, of course, Attila does his traditional black metal vocals on most of the song, but you get this really weird section of the song that does pop up twice. I guess you could call it a chorus. I don't know. But he goes from his, traditional black metal vocals to these really bizarre, overly ridiculous sort of almost opera vocals. Like he sounds like a very weird sort of mix of opera and Buddhist chanting, and it just sounds ridiculous. And it just sort of breaks the immersion. Where it's just really silly sounding. And if I were to listen to any version of this song, I'd probably listen to the live version from De Mysteriis Dom Satanis Alive, because I think he was able to perfect his vocals over time, especially with this particular song. It doesn't sound quite that ridiculous on that version. Still kind of a little bit, but definitely a lot better. But as for this original studio version, it's just silly. It just sounds very ridiculous, and it just anytime I put this on, I just kind of start laughing because it's just so ridiculous and hilariously bad. But that's my only major gripe with this album. My only minor gripe, I have one minor gripe, and that's, Dead isn't on vocals. But, whatever, it is what it is. Everything else about this I absolutely love. The production is probably the best production out of any Mayhem release, especially from the classic era. It still has a little bit of that rawness, but also has a little bit more sort of, I wouldn't want to say polish, but it has a little bit more professional done production. It was actually the first Mayhem release probably the second one to have done professionally. I mean, in terms of production. Although it's really unique in its production that it wasn't recorded in a studio. It was actually recorded in an opera house, I believe. Where different sort of areas of the opera house were set up to have different band members record their bits, different sections of different songs, and then they spliced it all together later on. And so it has that sort of really cool, very unique acoustic. I don't mean acoustic like acoustic guitar or anything. I mean acoustics in terms of the overall sound thing. It sounds very unique. It has that sort of almost epic nature to the overall sound of the production because it was recorded very uniquely in a very unique sort of environment, I guess. Attila's vocals, again, besides the title track, Attila's vocals are great. I love Attila's vocals. So he does these really weird inflections with his voice on songs. And it just sounds very sort of ghoulish and very otherworldly. And everyone else does a great job. I mean, iconic guitar work from Euronymous, especially the solo in Freezing Moon, and riffs in Funeral Fog, Pagan Fears, and Life Eternal, and stuff like that. The drum work is also fantastic. Probably my favorite drum work is definitely on the song Funeral Fog, with that sort of beginning, with that just absolutely rapid fire sort of drum bit. Overall, this is just a fantastic album, other than that one minor complaint with the one song. The only reason I have it a little bit lower on the list is because there's 3 other releases from the classic era that I like a little bit more. But yeah, it's at number 4. Alright. Number 3. Number 3 might be a surprise to most people, but my number 3 is Pure Fucking Armageddon. Of course, their debut demo from 1986. A lot of people... Okay, this is the split in the fandom. Half of the people know about it, but absolutely hate it. And the other half don't even know this thing exists, or they just know... Or they know of it, but have never heard of it. Or know of it and just haven't heard it. And I can understand for the half that maybe haven't heard it or doesn't even know it exists, because this has the weirdest release history out of probably any Mayhem release. This was originally released in '86, of course, to a limited number of copies. I think it was maybe, I don't know, 100? I don't know. I don't remember. But and then it was re-released in '91. And then it didn't have a re-release for like 30-something years until, I think it was 30 or 40-something years. I can't remember. I'm bad at math. But it didn't have a re-release after 1991 for a long, long time. Was it 91 or 92? I don't know. Around that point. And it just was pretty much unavailable for the longest time. Until, or at least in bootlegs, I guess. But in terms of official releases and more sort of easier to find releases, they didn't officially re-release this until, I think, this year. Was it this year? Yeah, this year. It was 2022, so yeah, this year. And even then, they did the stupid thing again of limited number of copies. So it's still kind of, I mean, it's easier to get a hold of, but it's still kind of difficult from time to time, depending, whenever you look on Discogs or something, you might find it, you might not. But yeah, this sells out really quickly, especially this most recent version. Anyway, this I love. Yeah, sure, people might complain about the raw audio, but honestly, this still has that sort of edge to it where it's super raw, but it's still audible. So everything's still audible. Also, now I know most people criticize prior releases, mainly the original and the 1991 re-release, because the audio is definitely the weakest on those versions. Now, I'm not saying it's bad or anything, but it is compared to this newest release. Now, this newest release has a new tape transfer, so it's probably the best it's ever sounded. It definitely has, a bit higher audio quality, just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, this is super underrated. You get quite a few interesting tracks. First off, you get the intro, Voice of a Tortured Skull, which is probably one of the eeriest and just absolutely, just crazy sounding sort of, intros ever. It's just really cool sounding. You get probably my second or third favorite version of Carnage. You get probably the most underrated Mayhem song ever, Ghoul, which was not featured on any other Mayhem release. Just a really awesome song with a really iconic, in my opinion, iconic riff. You get a weird cover of the Venom song Black Metal, but it's an instrumental version. But it's also played so fast to the point where it's almost unrecognizable. Pure Fucking Armageddon as well. Then you get you get another sort of weird track, kind of like Voice of a Tortured Skull. But this time it's basically has a lot of drums going on and just the band members just screaming maniacally and stuff. And then 3 instrumental versions of songs. You get an instrumental version of Ghoul, Pure Fucking Armageddon, and Carnage, and then there's a bonus track as well, which I believe was only on this version and the original release. But overall, I absolutely love this demo. Yeah, I mean, for anyone who's very picky about audio quality, this might not be for you. But for someone who doesn't mind raw audio quality for the most part, you might enjoy it. I know I do, but it's just one of those, sort of a hidden gem, in my opinion. It's very, very good, but very, very looked over, unfortunately. Alright, number 2. Number 2 is, Mayhem, sorry, not Mayhem, Freezing Moon / Carnage, also known as simply Studio Tracks. This is their second demo, which was released in 1990. Although for the longest time, for some reason, I thought it was released in 1988. I don't know where I got that idea from. I don't know. Maybe I misread the date at one point. Yeah, it's released in it was released in 1990. This is the only proper studio recordings with Dead on vocals. This is probably the clearest of any Dead era recordings that you're gonna hear. Just like with Pure Fucking Armageddon, this probably is another really sort of tough one to find. Mainly because it was limited. The original release, I believe, was limited to 20 copies on cassette, and this re-release was limited to 100 on 7-inch vinyl. And then there was a box set that did feature this, but I think that's probably the most accessible because the entire box set it included this and a bunch of other studio recordings. I don't think that was a limited thing. I think that was a continuous thing. It wasn't limited. So I think that's probably the easiest way you'll probably find it. Maybe not the most price friendly. I think it goes for like maybe $100 or more. I'm not entirely sure, but at least from what I remember. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, you get probably the second best version of the song, Freezing Moon, and my opinion, the best version of the song, Carnage, with Dead just absolutely giving it his absolute all, especially when the song ramps up near the end. He just lets loose his just furious vocals, and it's just awesome. Yeah, just very highly recommended, and it's my second favorite classic era Mayhem release. Number one, of course, is Live in Leipzig. Yeah, I mean, of course this was going to be number one. This is, in my opinion, the quintessential Mayhem release. And I'm not just talking about classic era Mayhem, I'm talking about Mayhem as a whole. Like, out of any of their things, this is the most quintessential. Yeah, people might say, oh, De Mysterious is the quintessential. I think that's a very quintessential album, but in terms of the number one, this is definitely it. You get almost every single song from the classic era, with the exception of Ghoul, which again was only featured in Pure Fucking Armageddon. But you get Death Crush. I believe, I don't know if this was slowed down or not. I don't know, I have to go back and look. But I know at the very least this version of Carnage was slowed down a bit for some reason. But yeah, Death Crush, Necrolust, Funeral Fog, the best version of Freezing Moon ever. Again, Carnage, Buried by Time and Dust, Pagan Fears, Chainsaw God, fucking Pure Fucking Armageddon. It's just probably the best example of a Mayhem live show, especially one with Dead on vocals. Yeah, I absolutely love it, and it's my absolute favorite album from the classic era of Mayhem. Alright, so that's about it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.